Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Another week, another anti-India move by the Maldives. They've got Turkish drones paid for from their contingency fund. Now, nothing wrong with the purchase per se. It's a free country, free to do as it pleases. But in the name of strategic autonomy, President Muizu is just poking India and being hostile. We'll discuss how. In the Russia-Ukraine war, unsuspecting job seekers are getting trapped. In the latest case, some Nepalese men have appealed to India to help secure their release. In India, the electoral bonds are back in focus. The Supreme Court has ordered the State Bank of India to hand over the data by tomorrow. We'll tell you why this is important. Also in news, the rise and fall of the Body Shop. It has filed for bankruptcy in the US and Canada. Why a photo featuring Kate Middleton has kicked up a storm. Why the Airbus CEO is wading into politics and issuing dire warnings about Trump and Russia. Why Australia is destroying millions of grapevines to limit wine production. What led to the state of anarchy in Haiti, Western powers and nature's fury? Why the Oscars are in news as much for their politics as for their prizes? And what is de-extinction? Can and should humans try to play God? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Has Russian President Putin sacked his naval chief? Reports say the admiral was fired because of Ukrainian strikes on Moscow's Black Sea fleet. The Kremlin declines to confirm the news. If true, this would be the biggest shake-up since Putin sacked his commander in Ukraine last year. The Citizenship Amendment Act, CAA, becomes a reality in India. The Narendra Modi government implements it before the general election. The law makes religion a test of citizenship for the first time. In 2019, it was cleared by Parliament amid protests. India test fires its homegrown Agni 5 missile. Prime Minister Modi lauds the scientists behind Mission Divyastra. This advanced weapon system allows a single missile to deploy multiple warheads at different locations. With this, India joins an elite group of nations. South Korea begins suspending licenses of striking doctors. Since late February, junior doctors have been on strike. Around 5,000 doctors have resigned. Ultimatums from the government have failed to end the strike, which has led to a healthcare crisis in the country. Relief for Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Her right-wing coalition wins the regional election in Abruzzo, just days after losing in Sardinia. It was Meloni's first loss since taking office in October 2022. The Abruzzo win is a boost for Meloni ahead of the European elections due in June. And Bitcoin reaches a new all-time high. Races past the $72,000 mark. Just last week, the virtual unit broke its 2021 record. Bitcoin is the world's most popular cryptocurrency. Mohammad Muizu is a man in a hurry. Most leaders would ease into their new roles, but not the Maldivian president. He's all about speed, a bit like those Instagram challenges that you see, weight loss in 60 days or better skin in 2 weeks. Except here, the stakes are much higher. And the cost of failure very steep. So let me tell you about Muizu's latest move. He has bought surveillance drones from Turkey. How many is not clear, but reports say it's Turkey's flagship machine, the Bayraktar TB2 drone. Each one costs around $5 million. Apparently, they were delivered on the 3rd of March, and they will be stationed here on the island of Mafaru. Their job is surveillance, to keep track of the Maldivian EEZ. That's Exclusive Economic Zone, EEZ. And we are talking about a very large area here, almost 1 million square kilometers of it. Until now, India and the Maldives surveyed this EEZ together, but now President Muizu wants to do it alone. He's been hinting at this for a while. In November last year, Muizu traveled to Turkey. It was his first foreign trip as president. And there he signed a weapons deal. He set aside $37 million from the contingency budget. I know it's strange. Killer drones are not a contingency for most countries, but for Muizu, they are. Because his plan is to boost domestic defense, to survey Maldivian waters alone.
I believe that the modern military capability to defend the country by road, sea and air should be strengthened in the Maldives. We have started to do that now, if God wills. The Maldivian Defence Force will soon be able to conduct the surveillance of the 900 square kilometer exclusive economic zone of the Maldives, 24 hours a day.
Well, that day is almost here. Reports say the drones will be deployed next week. So Mali won't need India anymore. Of course, that's their strategic choice. Even India buys drones from the global market. But look at the larger picture here. Look at how fast Muizu is pivoting. He was sworn in as president on the 17th of November last year. And since then, it's been one anti-India move after another. First, he asked Indian soldiers to leave. Then he picked Turkey for his maiden foreign trip. In doing so, he broke years of tradition. Then his ministers mocked the Indian Prime Minister. He visited China before India, signed a military deal with Beijing, and now he's bought lethal drones from Turkey. What's the common thread here? His opposition to India. And we need to be clear about that. This is not about keeping his options open. This is also not about strategic depth. This is about poking India. As we speak, a Chinese spy vessel is docked in the Maldives, the Xiang Yang Hong 3. India has opposed such voyages by Chinese ships in the Indian Ocean, but Muizu doesn't care. So don't mistake this for strategic autonomy. And I'll give you two reasons why. We know that India is trying to diversify its defense purchases, to not buy weapons from only Russia. But how is India doing that? Not by using slogans against Russia, not by mocking the Russian president, and not by rapidly moving away from Moscow. It's a slow and gradual process. And most importantly, it's not a hostile breakup with Russia. New Delhi wants to preserve its ties with Moscow. That is called keeping your options open. Muizu is doing the exact opposite. A, he's moving away from India, and B, he's making things hostile, which means he's not interested in preserving this relationship. Secondly, there's a double standard here. On the campaign trail, Muizu talked about Maldivian sovereignty. He criticized what he called the opaque deals between New Delhi and Mali. But as president, what does he do? Sign opaque deals with China. So clearly, sovereignty is not Muizu's problem. India is. He's preparing for a future without New Delhi. Consider his healthcare policy. A lot of Maldivians come to India for advanced treatment. Muizu wants to change that. His policy allows them to visit hospitals in the UAE and Thailand. The downside? The distance. They're much farther away. Same with food imports. Muizu has signed deals to increase trade with China. He says it will end dependence on one country. No prizes for guessing which one. Tourism is a similar story. Maldives has reported a 33% drop in Indian travelers. Last year, India was the second largest source of tourists to this country. This year, India has dropped to number 6. Some 27,000 Indians have visited the Maldives in 2024 so far. 27,000 Indians. The number for China is 54,000. You can write all this down to Muizu's rhetoric and expect it to increase in the coming days. Because the Maldives has parliamentary elections next month, Muizu will be betting on the India out slogan to secure a majority. It's a good election strategy in the short term, but as a long-term political call, maybe not. Now let's talk about the Ukraine war. India is being dragged into this conflict by Nepal. Let me explain. Nepalese citizens trapped on the front lines in Ukraine are seeking India's help. They want India's help to return home. A clip is doing the rounds on social media. It apparently shows Nepalese citizens. They say they were tricked into joining the Russian forces and now they want to go home and they're asking for India's help. This is what is circulating on social media. We've not been able to verify any of this. But here's what these people say, and I'm quoting. When we came here, we were told to go to the front line to fight in the war. Indian brothers who were with us are being rescued by their government. It's a cry for help. And it's not just Nepalese citizens who've been trapped in this war. Some Indians too ended up there. They were promised lucrative jobs in Russia by agents and middlemen. But when they got there, they were forced to join Russian forces, in many cases as helpers. Now, India is cracking down on these agents. Last week, New Delhi shared an update. Listen to this.
Several Indian nationals have been duped to work with the Russian army. We have strongly taken up the matter with the Russian government for early discharge of such Indian nationals. Strong action has been initiated against agents and unscrupulous elements who recruited them on false pretexts and promises.
This was last week. India is now working with Russia and trying to ensure the release of Indians. Nepal is attempting the same. In December last year, Kathmandu launched a crackdown. It rounded up 18 people involved in this operation. They were accused of human trafficking and forgery. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. Reports say 15,000 Nepalese citizens ended up on the Russian front lines. 15,000. They were forced to fight against Ukraine on Russia's behalf. In January, Nepal's foreign minister spoke about this. His name is Narayan Prakash Saud. He issued a firm message to Russia asking Moscow to immediately stop this recruitment and to repatriate Nepalese citizens. But Nepal has not made much headway. Last week, their Prime Minister spoke, Pushpa Kamal Dahal, better known as Prachand. He said Nepal is engaged in diplomatic talks with Russia. Just like India, they're trying to get their citizens released. And these cases show that a major trafficking network is at work here, trapping innocent job seekers, promising them big salaries and forcing them to fight in a war. Governments need to work together to bust this network. Otherwise, more innocent people will keep getting trapped because this war does not look like it's ending in a hurry. The front lines are frozen and both sides are losing fighters. So foreigners are being roped in. Both Russia and Ukraine are recruiting in large numbers. People from 55 countries have signed up to fight for Ukraine. That's around 20,000 people and counting from 55 countries. And that's not all. NATO soldiers are also in Ukraine from countries like the United States, Britain and France. Reports say they have deployed their special forces, also their military advisors in Kiev. Their numbers are small. Their troops are involved in logistical support and training the Ukrainians. So just like weapons, Ukraine is importing fighters from abroad. It would be fair to say that there are thousands of foreign fighters on both sides. Many of them volunteered to join, but many others have been trapped, mostly from countries in the global south because they're vulnerable. They serve as a recruiting ground for middlemen and agents. There are millions of jobless innocents looking for well-paying jobs. They risk becoming cannon fodder in this war. What we need is a unified global response to stop this. Here in India, a legal tussle is underway. The country's biggest bank versus the country's top court. The State Bank of India versus the Supreme Court of India. I know it sounds like a nail-biter, but trust me, it's not. The court is showing the SBI who is boss. It all started with a verdict last month. A 5-judge bench scrapped India's electoral bonds. These were campaign funding tools. They allowed people and companies to donate money anonymously. First, you had to buy bonds from the SBI, the State Bank of India. You buy bonds from there. Then you could donate them to a party. And finally, these parties could encash those bonds. But last month, the court abolished this system. It also issued directives to the SBI, provide details of the bonds to India's Election Commission. The date of purchase, the name of the purchaser, the bond amount, and also what each party got. The bank was told to share all this information. This information is stored within the SBI. So the court asked the bank to hand over this data to the Election Commission of India. The deadline was March 6th. But the SBI wanted an extension. They said, we can give this data only by the end of June. Why the delay though? The SBI says it is taking time to match the data. Apparently, the bond information is stored in two silos. One deals with the purchasers, the other deals with the political parties. So the bank is trying to match the two. But the Supreme Court is having none of it. The judges have refused to extend the deadline. They also had some sharp words for the bank. Listen to this.
We have not told you to do the matching exercise. We have asked you for a plain disclosure. Therefore, the ground on which you seek an extension of time to make the disclosure does not accord with the directions in the judgment at all. In the last 26 days, what extent of matching has been done by you? What steps have you taken in the last 26 days? There are applications absolutely silent on that.
We can put a detailed affidavit on that, Manoj, because I know
It should have been disclosed in the affidavit.
I agree, Manoj. I agree.
State Bank of India, which is coming to us, we expect that there should be a degree of candor on the part of the State Bank of India. That this is what the work which we have done. The work is at this stage. We need an extension of time to carry out the balance of the exercise which remains.
The new deadline is tomorrow, the 12th of March. By the close of business hours, the data must be given to the Election Commission of India. If not, well, there could be trouble. A few contempt petitions have been filed against the SBI. They accuse the bank of violating the court's order. Today, the judges did not act on them, but they did warn the SBI. The bank has been put on notice by the Supreme Court of India. If tomorrow's deadline is violated, there will be consequences. Which brings us to the big question. Why was this deadline so controversial? Why did the SBI want an extension? The opposition has its own theories. India's elections are slated for this year. The assumption is the election will be over by the end of June. So suppose the court granted the SBI's extension, then the bond information would have been published only after the voting. Of course, the SBI has not accepted this. Their argument is technical, that the whole process will take some time, but the Supreme Court is asking, why should it? After all, every bond purchase has a routine process. The KYC is done, an application is drawn, and of course, payment confirmation is taken. All of this has a digital trace. So the court says this should be easy. The SBI should not be taking so much time. Now, I know that the electoral bond is a sensitive issue. It's also deeply divisive. But the question here is not so much about the bonds, because that was settled last month, that question. The Supreme Court declared these bonds unconstitutional. The question here is about the SBI. We are talking about a national institution. It dominates the Indian banking space. It has around 1/4 of the market share, around 480 million customers, and over 22,000 branches. The SBI is not just another bank in India, so today's court observations will hurt its image. It also makes tomorrow very interesting. Once the SBI submits the data, assuming that they do, the action will shift to the Election Commission. Again, there's a deadline. The Election Commission must publish the bond data by March 15th. Interesting times ahead. We'll be tracking this story closely. Do you know what happens when brands do not keep up with the times? They collapse. Why just brands? Anyone who does not keep up with the times does not survive. Case in point, the Body Shop. When it started, the Body Shop was a trailblazer, the it thing for millennials. Colorful soaps, luscious body butters. It was cruelty-free, it was vegan, it was also sustainable. No other brand was doing it then, so the Body Shop had first mover's advantage. But it seems they did not use that advantage very well. Today, the brand is facing a crisis. The Body Shop has filed for bankruptcy. This is in the US and Canada. The UK arm has collapsed in administration. And in Australia, it's struggling to pay suppliers. Stores are shutting down, hundreds of jobs are at risk, and there are large debts. Basically, the chain's future hangs in balance. But how did it reach this stage? What did the Body Shop do wrong? How did the trailblazing chain go broke? This story goes back to 1976. The Body Shop was founded by Anita Roddick. She was a British environmental and human rights campaigner. Roddick was inspired by her travels. She saw fresh, natural body butter. She wanted to sell it. So the Body Shop started as a small business in Brighton with just around $5,000. Roddick sold just 25 products. They used natural ingredients. They were ethically sourced. More importantly, they were cruelty-free, which means they were not tested on animals. So the Body Shop was ahead of its time. It was a disruptor in the market. By 1984, the Body Shop was really popular. Its shares were listed on the London Stock Exchange. The company was valued at around $102 million. It achieved cult status. All was well. But things started to unravel sometime around 2006. Roddick sold the brand to L'Oreal for $1 billion. Of course, there was some backlash because the Body Shop had made its name trying to be ethical, and many believed that L'Oreal was the opposite of that. So loyal customers started abandoning it. But that was only the beginning of its troubles. The brand was underperforming. In 2017, L'Oreal sold it to Brazil's Natura. It did not help. Again in 2023, Natura sold it to Aurelius. This was for $266 million. So you see, in 7 years, they had 3 owners and a fast depreciation. It's a bleak forecast. And its failure can be attributed to 3 main reasons. One is growing competition. When the Body Shop started, it was the only one in that game. But soon the segment grew, more players came in, and they had better branding, better marketing. And it was not like Body Shop was doing badly. It was just that the others were doing much better. The second is online shopping. The Body Shop was a store-friendly business. It did not really expand much online and lost out. And the third reason is the growing cost of stores. At its peak, the Body Shop had 2,500 stores worldwide. Running them was expensive. During the pandemic, sales began dipping. In 2022, there was a year-on-year decline of 13.5%, which is not good news for any business. Which brings us to today. The global chain is struggling. Its shops may not shutter yet, but the future does not look so bright. Now, we must also say that the Body Shop operates on a franchise model. So it has local partners in different countries. The top markets are the UK, Australia, and Indonesia. It's struggling there. But in some markets, the outlook is optimistic, like in India. The Body Shop aims to double its business in India. It aims to add 100 stores by 2025. So all is not bad. When the Body Shop entered the market, it made its own rules. But as time went by, it became comfortable, it seems. The products were good, but they weren't new or innovative. And the consumer was spoilt for choice. The lesson here is simple. Heritage is great, but businesses cannot run just on that. Our next story is about a mystery. One even Sherlock Holmes would struggle to solve. It includes a missing princess, a silent palace, worried well-wishers, and a trove of questions. On Mother's Day, Kate Middleton uploaded a picture with her children. It was a sweet gesture, but the internet was quick to call it a bad Photoshop job. The mystery further thickened when top photo agencies called it manipulated. Kate has since issued an apology. She says she was experimenting with her editing skills. But that hasn't stopped the questions. Where is Kate Middleton? Why hasn't she been seen since her surgery? Is her condition very serious? Our next report tells you about the curious case of the missing princess and why the UK remains obsessed with her.
The British monarchy has seen many scandals. There have been abdications, affairs, separations, divorces, racism claims, Nazi costumes. You would think they'd seen it all, but clearly not. The royal family has been rocked by a bad Photoshop job. It started with this picture, a seemingly innocent one. Kate Middleton sitting with her children, a Mother's Day tribute. It looks endearing. But on closer inspection, a lot unraveled. Social media was the first to take notice. They said the photo had inconsistencies. It was like a bad editing job. Here are a few of the discrepancies that the internet was quick to point out. Kate Middleton is not wearing her wedding ring. The zip on her jacket is inconsistent. The pattern on Prince Louis's jumper doesn't match. A part of Princess Charlotte's wrist is missing. The floor has a strange shape. A tree behind is in full bloom, even though it's March. It was like an internet treasure hunt. The more you looked, the more discrepancies you found. And the internet had a field day. Memes, questions, some good old snooping. It's like the whole internet was Sherlock Holmes for a day. But while social media was having fun, photo agencies didn't find it as amusing. Multiple major photo agencies, the likes of the Associated Press, AFP, Reuters and Getty Images, they said the image was manipulated, so they issued a kill notice for it. This is unprecedented. And it raised more questions. What exactly was going on? Today, the Princess of Wales issued a clarification. She said she was experimenting with editing. She apologized for any confusion caused. But the internet wasn't convinced. Kate Middleton was last seen in public in December. On January 17th, the palace said she was admitted to the hospital. It was for a scheduled abdominal surgery. No other details were provided. On January 29th, the palace said she had returned home. So she spent 13 nights in the hospital following her surgery. But even then, Kate did not appear in public. The palace said she won't resume her duties until Easter, which is March 31st. That raised a few eyebrows. Kate Middleton has always been a public personality. Being in the public eye is central to her brand. I mean, just 7 hours after giving birth, she was out of the hospital, posing in front of the media with her baby. The same woman has now been missing for almost 2 months. It started out as an odd situation, but now has turned into a full-blown scandal. And the internet is going down a royal rabbit hole. Many believe something is wrong with Kate's health. Some believe her condition is more serious than what the palace is putting out. There are as many conspiracy theories as there are funny memes, like some people saying she just got bangs and is waiting for that to grow out. But everyone has one fundamental question: where is Kate Middleton? The photograph was supposed to quell the rumors, but it seems to have done just the opposite and fanned the flames further. Guess we'll have to wait till Easter to get some answers.
What do you expect a CEO to do? Lead a company, make more profits, maybe introduce a good corporate culture. But here's what you do not expect from them: geopolitical commentary, especially on elections in a foreign country. But that's what Guillaume Faury is doing. He's the chief executive of Airbus. His company is worth almost $124 billion. It makes half of all commercial planes in the world. And this week, he made a damning assessment. He said that Europe is not ready for Donald Trump and Russia. What does that mean? Well, Donald Trump is challenging Joe Biden for the presidency in the US. He's not a big fan of NATO. In fact, he's talked about abandoning NATO members. So if Trump wins, Europe may lose its godfather, its military defender. And Faury says Europe is not ready for that. Same with Russia. He says Putin is spending a lot of money on defense. So if Moscow expands the war, Europe is unprepared to face it. Now, these are big claims. Does the Airbus CEO have a solution for it? Well, yes, he does. His solution is this: spend more on defense. Airbus wants European nations to think beyond the US, to build their own military assets, their own weapons and fighter jets. Listen to this. We have put a lot in the hands of others. We are subcritical on most of the different systems in Europe. We do not collaborate enough to create investment at scale. We buy mostly from outside of Europe and mostly from the US. Why is he saying this though? Maybe because his company makes weapons. Airbus is the biggest European defense company. They make fighter jets and helicopters. So more defense spending equals more profits for them. Hence these dire warnings. Just look at these numbers. Europe spent around $388 billion on defense last year. $388 billion. Asia spent a lot more, some $510 billion last year. So the belief is that Europe has untapped potential. They should be spending a lot more on defense. And Airbus could use that help. Their profits fell by around 11% in 2023. More defense spending could turn things around for them. The question is, how do you do that? You see, Europe is not a single entity. You have 27 countries in the European Union, and you have Britain outside it. You also have the likes of Switzerland and Norway. So increasing spending is easier said than done. But the Airbus CEO has an idea. Again, listen to this, and I'm quoting. It's quite clear that we need to find a way to pool our efforts together as Europeans to have one very powerful capability by type of weapon system. How would that work? Let's consider an example. Right now, European nations have multiple fighter jets. Airbus has the Eurofighter, France has the Rafale, and Sweden has the Gripen. The Airbus proposal is to unite all of this. Instead of splitting resources, combine them, make one European fighter jet. It's a very ambitious idea. After all, American firms still dominate the European market. The UK, Belgium, Germany, Italy and the Netherlands fly American F-35s. They also use Boeing aircraft like the Apache, the Chinook, the C-17 and the P-8 spy jets. You can't change that overnight. The Airbus CEO may have his own capitalist reasons for what he said, but there is logic here. How long can you depend on another country's hardware? Can you keep, in fact, outsourcing security? It's not just a question for Europe, it's also a question for countries like India. We are the biggest defense importers in the world. If you localize that industry, there are many advantages to make in India in defense. You have more control over the technology, you can create more jobs, and you don't have to depend on foreign powers. So local technology does help. Whether it's urgent for Europe is a different question. After all, the Airbus CEO is not exactly a neutral player. It's like asking a pianist what his favorite instrument is. Now let's turn our attention to Australia, which faces a peculiar problem. Australia has too much wine, more than what they can export, sell or drink. So the authorities are taking drastic measures. They're killing the goose which lays the golden egg. Millions of wine grapes and grape vines in Australia are being destroyed. Will the decision prove to be counterproductive? Our next report explores.
James Cremasco is a fourth-generation grape grower. His vineyard is going through some tough times. He's being forced to destroy his own crop.
This is a block of 35-year-old Shiraz. They're destined to be pulled out at the moment with an excavator.
There is little Cremasco can do. There are many more like him across Australia who have to watch their vines be destroyed by the excavator. Already millions of vines have been destroyed. Many more will be pulled down in the coming months. Australia is trying to solve a crisis of overproduction. There is just too much wine in the global market and not enough buyers, leaving farmers like Cremasco with no easy options.
We're pulling these vines out because they're not viable at the moment with today's prices, today's commodities. Dollars per hectare just aren't adding up, and there's no point growing a crop that I can't survive off.
It takes years for wine producers to process the grapes into exquisite wine. Raising the crop feels cruel. It's wiping out years of hard work instantly. But these producers have no other choice. Australia is the world's fifth largest exporter of wine. In 2023, it had more than 2 billion litres of it. That supply is enough to last 2 years, which is too much. Some of the supply is already spoiled, so owners are trying to quickly dispose of the stock. Growing more wine is out of the question. Producers in places like Griffith are struggling. They are the hub for Australia's wines. In the 1950s, a group of Italian migrants arrived here and shaped these landscapes. 2/3 of Australia's wine grapes are grown in Griffith. The local producers still follow the same Italian techniques passed down over generations. Now, due to oversupply, many winemakers are forced to shut shop. Bill Calabria is a second-generation winemaker. He believes the crisis is causing serious damage to the local community.
Yeah, it's one of the worst I've seen for a long time, mainly because it's global. It's not just the Riverina, it goes right across Australia and across the globe of the world. And this makes it a very difficult time for the industry. The prices are not very good, but we've just got to hang in there and hopefully come out the other end.
The problem is indeed global. Consumption is falling fast. There is less demand for wine around the world, and this has majorly affected production. In 2023, wine production worldwide hit a 60-year low. Producers in Australia are also suffering due to China's trade restrictions. In 2020, Beijing slapped a 169% tariff on Australian wines. The tariff was a response to Canberra's call for an investigation into the origins of the Wuhan virus. These curbs may be lifted this month, but for these winemakers, this relief may be too little too late.
Now let's turn our attention to Haiti. The country's capital is under siege. Gangs have overrun Port-au-Prince. They're stepping up their attacks on the government. They're attacking police stations, burning them down to free inmates who then join the gangs on their rampage. On Friday night, the gangs attacked Haiti's presidential palace. Gunshots and explosions rocked downtown Port-au-Prince. Haiti's police headquarters also came under fire. Law enforcement barely repelled the attack. This violence has other nations scrambling. Yesterday, the US airlifted all non-essential staff from its embassy. The European Union has shut its offices. Helicopters carried German and other European diplomats out of Haiti because the international airport has ceased to function. Haiti is in a state of anarchy. To address this, Haiti's neighbors have called a meeting today, the Caribbean Community, or CARICOM. They're hosting the meeting in Jamaica.
From our reports, the situation on the ground remains dire and is of serious concern to us. At the same time, we have taken the decision as a community to write the heads of state and heads of government of the key countries with whom Haiti is engaged as partners, inviting them to meet with our heads in CARICOM in Kingston, Jamaica on Monday, the 11th of March.
The Caribbean Community is a 15-member group. They've also invited some key stakeholders, the US, Canada, France, Brazil, and the United Nations. But the focus is on two of these, the US and France, because in a lot of ways, they're directly responsible for Haiti's present situation. France committed the original sin. They were the colonizers. Haiti was once the richest Caribbean colony until it gained independence in 1804. The former slaves rose up and won their freedom from France. But sadly, things went south after that. 21 years later, France returned with gunships. In 1825, France demanded compensation for the loss of their property, including the former slaves. France demanded 150 million francs. 150 million francs, do you know how much that is worth in modern terms? About $21 billion. Haiti did not have that kind of money, but it had no choice but to pay up. So it borrowed that money from French banks, and Haiti spent the next 122 years repaying that money. 122 years. This was their independence fee. They stopped paying it only in 1947. If you think this was bad, listen to the rest. Haiti's last payment to France was in the year 1888. After that, the payments went to the US. The US invaded and occupied Haiti in 1915 at the behest of the National City Bank of New York. Today, that company is called Citibank. So Citibank built part of its fortune with the occupation and loot of Haiti. For 19 years, the US and its banks ravaged this country. When the Americans were done, Haiti was left an impoverished mess. That's how it became the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Despite this, Haiti stayed dependent on the US for trade and remained vulnerable to American influence. Prime Minister Ariel Henry is unelected. The West backed him to take over in 2021 after Haiti's elected president was assassinated. And this was not a one-off. Haiti has seen numerous presidential assassinations and coups. It got so bad that in 1995, Haiti disbanded its army. They couldn't take any more coups, so no army. And that's when the gangs came in. No army for 22 years meant that gangs could proliferate. And that's why they control the country today, to the detriment of the Haitian people.
The gangs forced me to leave my home. I have become a nomad along with my 3 children. We have nowhere to go. We came here, but there's no water here. We are miserable.
To compound the misery, Haiti has been ripped apart by natural disasters as well. In 2010, there was a massive earthquake. 300,000 people died. Another 300,000 were injured. In 2016, there was a Category 4 hurricane. Then in 2021, another earthquake. This has left Haiti's infrastructure in a shambles. Houses crumbled. People became homeless and have remained homeless for years. Now the gangs are driving them out of their refugee camps as well. As you can see, there are many reasons for the anarchy in Haiti, some natural, some a gift from the West. Now those countries are gathering to decide Haiti's future. Hopefully they won't make things worse. Have you watched the Jurassic Park? If you haven't, the premise is simple. Scientists clone dinosaurs and bring them to life. Soon, the ferocious predators break free. They go on a hunt and put lives in danger. This is a classic tale of man versus nature, a warning against playing God. Now, many say the blockbuster was ahead of its time. The first Jurassic Park movie came out in 1993. Back then, bringing animals back from the dead was considered near impossible. But things have changed since then. Today, we are witnessing the dawn of de-extinction. This term means exactly what it sounds like. De-extinction refers to the reversal of extinction. It uses an advanced cloning method and promises to bring back extinct plants or animals, like the woolly mammoths. They were alive during the last ice age. They were plodding across North America and Eurasia until about 4,000 years ago. That's when they went extinct. Some of their carcasses froze in the icy tundra, which acted as a freezer. It preserved not just their bones, but also their flesh and fur. And this gave scientists a chance to collect their DNA and birthed a new idea. What if humans could use mammoth DNA to recreate them? Could the woolly mammoths be brought back from the dead? Some American scientists certainly think so. They've been trying to engineer a woolly mammoth by creating genetic blueprints. But to actually grow the animal, scientists needed real tissues. So they looked at a genetically close species. In simpler terms, they looked at a close living relative, like the Asian elephants. So they can reprogram Asian elephant cells and use them to grow mammoth cells. And now scientists have made an elephant-sized leap in that direction. In a first, they have created Asian elephant stem cells in a lab. Now these cells can be edited. They can be inserted with mammoth-like genetic traits, like a woolly coat, smaller ears, and a layer of fat to survive in the cold. Once these cells are grown, they can be used to make eggs and sperm, after which an embryo can be created and planted inside a womb capable of gestating a baby elephant. Theoretically, the plan seems far-fetched, but it is plausible. The world already saw this back in 1996 when Dolly the sheep was cloned to life. So the technology has been around for a while. For the past 2 decades, scientists have been using it for de-extinction. And woolly mammoth is not the only species on their target list. There is the dodo bird. It went extinct in 1681, or the Tasmanian tiger that went extinct in 1936. But despite the efforts, no one has been successful so far because the results are a hit and miss. Take the example of bucardo. Now this is a wild mountain goat species. It went extinct in 2000. The last bucardo was crushed under a fallen tree. But a year before the death, scientists took some of its cells for preservation. It's a very interesting story. In 2003, they attempted cloning the cells. 407 embryos were created. About half of them were transferred into the wombs of 57 goats. Of all 57 cases, only 7 turned into pregnancies. And of all 7, only 1 was born successfully. So bucardo became the first species to return from extinction, but only for a few moments because the baby's lung was misshapen. It suffocated and died within minutes. And the species went extinct again for the second time in 3 years. It was a big loss, and it raised a lot of ethical questions as well, which apply to woolly mammoths too. How many lives will be lost before one woolly mammoth is created? How much trauma and suffering will animals go through? Plus, elephants are highly social beings. They pass down survival skills to their offspring. Woolly mammoths will get none of that. Their survival will be tough. This is a hairy situation. There are technical hurdles and mammoth ethical challenges because de-extinction promises only hope and blood, not results. So who decides which species come back? Should humans be playing God at all? Think about it. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Gaza, humanitarian aid was airdropped into the Strip on the first day of Ramadan. In Buenos Aires, Argentine fans pay a tribute to Dragon Ball creator who died at the age of 68. And in Istanbul, therapy dogs comfort passengers at the airport. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 2011, a 9.1 magnitude earthquake struck the coast of Japan. It was the biggest earthquake ever recorded in history. It killed more than 250 people and triggered the Fukushima nuclear disaster. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.